Thanks, Mark. Just want to pick up on one point Mark made about the fact that in-depth reporting is being done less and less. That's something that I, lamented. I was a reporter for many years, over 30 years, and because of what has happened to the newspaper business, it's been downsized, it's been defunded. It's been a real shock to the world of journalism and reporters. I have many close friends who have lost what they thought were promising careers that they would have for a long time, but because of the restructuring of journalism, it's becoming less and less possible to do this sort of investigative, in-depth reporting. It just costs too much money. I mean, it really is a struggle at many, many American newspapers, and I think we're all worried about what that means for the future of journalism and for what that means for our ability to serve a watchdog function. I'm grateful to be here at CIS because I had 5 months to work on this report. I say there were 5 months during which I had spent about 80% of my time working on this report. So that's a sort of luxury that very few reporters have, and I'm glad that I can continue to do that sort of work. It's, as Mark was saying, I still consider myself a reporter. Just a quick word about who is not here today. I invited the State Department to come, hoped that they would come. I'm disappointed they didn't come, but they're in a sensitive stage now. They're proposing changes to reform some aspects of the program. These are politically sensitive. They want to put certain industries off limits to the SWT program, industries like the one up in Hershey, PA, where kids working in warehouses staged a very well-publicized protest. And also there are those who want to put the Alaska fish processing industry off limits, which is, we'll talk about here, in which, by the way, the report begins with an anecdote. In 1969, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, having just graduated from Wesleyan before she started Yale Law School, worked in an Alaska fish processing plant, doing what they call sliming fish, cleaning the innards of fish. Just as a footnote, the summer of '69, I worked in Alaska. I was in college, and I was a rod man in a survey crew. A summer job in Alaska used to be considered a big deal for an American college kid. It was an adventure and a chance to make a lot of money. One of the things we can talk about a little bit today is what has happened to that, in part because of the growth of the SWT, summer work travel industry, which makes large numbers of good working college kids from overseas who are eager to make $7.75 an hour because in their countries where a middle-aged wage might be $300 a month. $775 sounds real good, and when you can double that or time and a half with overtime, that sounds real attractive. That's something we'll get into a little bit. Another quick introductory point, we're going to be talking about just the summer work travel program, which is one component of the J-1 visa program, which also brings over in separate categories camp counselors, au pairs, teachers, researchers. There are 16 different J-1 categories. So. And with that introduction, let me begin the PowerPoint. I think it'll take about 15 minutes, but I'll try to go through it quickly. This is the State Department's rationale for the purpose of the program, the intention of the program, and I think it's seriously or obviously a good intention, one that's difficult to argue with on its face. It wants to do something good, but. The problem, as I see it, is that it has led to a huge industry that is motivated by a chance to make a lot of money recruiting kids, hiring kids, and taking advantage of various tax incentives that our own government offers. And the sky's the limit. That's a phrase from an SWT recruiting site in Singapore that I quote in the report. They said in their website, there are thousands of communities across the United States that offer you through SWT a chance for a totally unique experience in the United States. I think, that sounds very admirable too. The question is, what are the effects on American labor markets as well? And then up against this vision, we have another concern expressed by the President in his State of the Union address, who is talking, of course, about outsourcing. He says, it's time to stop rewarding businesses that ship jobs overseas and start rewarding companies that create jobs right here in America. What I see as interesting in this regard is that at the same time our government is professing this goal and talking about jobs being the most important thing we can do for our economy, we have this program which has the effect of bringing kids from overseas to work jobs that are not being worked by American kids. The question as to why the American kids are taking that jobs we'll take up a little bit later. So here's a chart that tracks the growth of the program. In 1996, very small, 20,000 kids coming over in SWT every year. It grew very rapidly, reaching a peak in 2008 of 153,000. And then for a couple of reasons, the recession and some problems in terms of abuse and cheating of some of the SWT kids who were sent over here to jobs that did not exist because of unscrupulous sponsors, it shrunk. And last year it was down to 103,000. But there is clearly enormous potential for this program to grow. The State Department boasts about the growth of the program around the world. This shows the top 10 sending countries from 2004, 2006, 2008, and 2010. In 2004, Poland was at the top, but Poland has entered the EU. There are more opportunities for Polish kids to work in Poland, and so their numbers have dropped. Meanwhile, Russia, has shot to the top. Brazil is coming on in big ways. The program is very popular in the Ukraine. If we could go to 2010, a lot of Turkish kids were working in Hershey, a lot of Turkish kids working in Alaska and other places. Brazil is coming up, Thailand, Ireland. China is coming on big, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that there are millions of young people around the world who would love to come to the U.S. under this program. We could fill all our summer jobs and all our part-time jobs year-round through this program, because the program, it's called Summer Work Travel, but the summer is not our summer. The summer is the summer in the home countries of these kids. So Latin American kids, South American kids come up during their summer, which is our winter. And many of these recruiters boast about year-round availability of these summer work travel kids. And you can see Peru is the last of the top countries, but a lot of kids from Brazil, Argentina, Colombia. There is some growth in Mexico, and there are many entrepreneurs in these countries that want to see the country grow. Another aspect of the program is visa diplomacy. This is the use of visas to bring over visitors from foreign countries with the idea that this is good for our foreign relations with other countries, and this is the value that is being served by bringing over these kids. And one of the rationales is, look, a lot of these kids don't have the money. They don't come from wealthy families and otherwise could not afford to come to the U.S. This program gives them a chance to come to the U.S., work, make some money, and then travel and get an idea of our country. And presumably, the hope is they'll go back home and with a good opinion of the U.S. and as presumed future leaders of their country, since they all have to be college students. The idea is that this in the long term will be good for U.S. foreign relations. This is a view of some of the criticisms that have been brought against the program. They say it's called a cheap labor program, called a cultural exchange, but it's really cheap labor. And by the way, I should point out, there are very few American kids who go to work in countries like Ukraine, Moldova, Romania. I mean, American kids don't speak those languages and don't want to work for the local wages, whereas a Moldovan kid thinks that making minimum wage in the U.S. is a pretty good deal. The idea that it has monetized the foreign policy initiative, that it and generates enormous profits. SWT has become a money machine. Over $100 million every year in fees, and a lot of people competing for those fees and wanting to grow that pie. There's a lot of pressure to grow that pie from an SWT lobby that acknowledges that it seeks permissive, that's their term, they want permissive, i.e. loose regulation by the State Department. Of course, the criticism that it displaces American young people, we'll hear that from Jeff, we'll hear that from Sarah. And interestingly, it provides incentives for American employers not to hire American kids, but to hire SWT kids. American employers don't pay Social Security taxes. They don't pay Medicare taxes, and they don't pay federal unemployment taxes on their SWT workers. It's about an 8% savings right off the top. So our government is incentivizing American employers not to hire American kids, but instead to hire SWT kids, all in the name, of course, of cultural exchange. And then also on the side of the kids, a lot of these kids are paying an average of $1,100 in fees to the sponsoring agencies. The sponsoring agencies have the job of screening, selecting, and orienting these kids, and then monitoring their progress once they're in the country. But when the kids are paying $1,100 in fees and maybe another $1,500 in travel expenses, they are in a lot of debt, especially in terms of the dollars that they could earn in their own country. So they are highly motivated to work hard, get all the hours they can get, and not to complain. Daniel Costo, the Economic Policy Institute, who wrote a really good paper about this issue, calls it a form of indentured servitude for these foreign kids. This is a quote from a Russian recruiting website, which basically looks at all the benefits that are offered. And he's basically asking what I think a lot of people is, can this really be true? That the U.S. government is offering this package of benefits? Sounds like a scam. It's called Wolt.org. It's a Russian site. It's not. This is Work and Travel USA program designed by the U.S. Department of State to promote intercultural friendship. There's been a long history of critiques of this SWT program and other J-1 programs going back to 1990. The GAO offered that criticism. 10 years later, the State Department's own OIG offered a very similar criticism, basically saying the management has been terrible, the oversight has been lax, the regulation has been next to meaningless. And what I found most remarkable was how little has been done over the years to reform this situation. I do think that there are encouraging signs that in the past 6 months, with a big change in leadership at the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the State Department, there is recognition of the gravity of the problem and the need to correct it.
For the studies used in this video and others, please visit www.cis.org.